This is Performance Theory with Mike Clark.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Performance Theory. I am your host, Mike Clark. Today we're talking education. All over the world, there's a growing consensus that our education systems are broken. Rapid changes and increased complexity of today's world are presenting new challenges and putting new demands on our education system. There's growing awareness of the necessity to change and improve the preparation of these students for productive functioning in society due to the changing and demanding environment. So how can we create an education system that works for kids instead of against them? On this episode, I want to welcome someone who's been working in the education system for over 20 years as an elementary school teacher. Please welcome Chris Ruhl to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Chris, let's give the listeners a little bit of background on your history and perhaps, where you went to school, why you got into teaching in the first place.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And for as long as I can remember, and for as far back as anyone can tell me, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I started by coaching the elementary junior curling programs in town and volunteering my time for other things, and it just seemed like a natural fit. So I attended Grand Prairie Regional College and then transferred to the University of Alberta, got my teaching degree, and then I spent some time teaching in various classrooms, various grades for the last 20 years.
How did the education system get you prepared for teaching? Was it accurate in what they prepared you for, or were they kind of idealistic? And as far as in terms of what you're actually going to be seeing in the schools?
I have found, and I see this on a regular basis because I take practicum students every year. So I have seen over the course of my career, when I started, I felt when I entered the classroom, I was fully prepared for planning, being an educator, and working with children. What I was not prepared for was the diversity of students and student needs that I've encountered over my career. Same can be said now for the practicum students that I work with and mentor. They come in knowing the basics, but you don't learn what you're doing until you're actually there. And that is as big a part of teaching as knowing what you're supposed to teach.
Have you found it more challenging from the time that you started to now? Because I know that they keep expanding class sizes. Like, compare your first year in school to this year.
The first year I taught, I had 12 students in my class. Granted, I was in a special circumstance, but at that point, average class size was still 18 students. Throughout my career, I've had as high as 37 students. This year, I have low 20s. I have 23 students this year. What I'm expected to do as a professional has definitely changed. There is always more and more being added to the plates of a teacher. And teaching is the priority of our job, but we are also in some cases the adult that the students trust the most.
You're expected to also do extracurricular activities as well, because you had mentioned that you took over some coaching, right?
Yeah, I coordinate and plan the entire after-school curling program for the city, but what you do for extracurricular is always dependent upon your specific school, your specific administration. But you're never, I have never had to be specifically told what I am doing for extracurricular. It's always been a volunteer basis. I grew up in the after-school curling program, and to me it was very important that I continue that and make that program thrive.
Outside of the extracurricular activities, what other big changes are you expected to take on? Like, I do know that they become more integrated classes, correct?
Yes, inclusion is a huge thing in the classroom. I remember growing up where there was those students who were handy capable, special needs. They would be taken from the class for extra help, extra support. With a completely inclusive classroom, those students are with you as a teacher, and you work with them all, and you develop your lessons and you teach your lessons in such a way that every student is able to see success.
Now, do you find that to be a bit of a drawback since it may take away from the experience that some of the other students are doing?
No, I personally don't. I am because I teach lower elementary, I make my lessons, everything I do is very project-based, hands-on, so that way it gives the students, everybody, a chance to participate in the lessons. Those who are able to do more, I extend the activity. Those who are not able to do as much, they have, as long as they meet my standards or the criteria that's expected by me or my curriculum, then to me that's a success. You can have students in a class that range from a pre-kindergarten to a grade 6, and you just make sure as a teacher your lessons are accommodating and reaching every single one of those students.
You cannot technically fail a student in the Alberta education system, correct?
Correct.
Now, do you think that works for their benefit or against them? What are your thoughts on this?
My thought is, when we were in school, we had that fear of failing. And for us, that was a motivation for us to put ourselves in, get our butts in gear and do what we need to do. That fear of failure is no longer there, but it has been replaced. Students can stay in the class, they can stay with their peer group, and that's what they want. They want to stay with their friends. And it goes again with that idea of inclusiveness. A student who is working with their peers, even though they are behind or they're struggling, they are still going to be able to keep that social aspect of their class. Being held back or being failed, then you know what? Sometimes you get that sensation of being bullied or being teased because you were the kid who was held back. That's not a situation I see. Even when there has been those students who have been held back for various reasons, whether it's medical or just developmental, that stigma or that sense is no longer present, at least in my school environment.
Now, do you find that if you're advancing the kids and they're not meeting the criteria because you can't fail them, that affects them going through junior high or high school? Because being in the education system for 20 years, you've obviously had some kids that moved up and have graduated.
I have actually just now, or the other day, I had my entire class of grade 4s that I taught 8 years ago showed up in their caps and gowns to come see me and thank me for being their teacher. Those students included ones that, I did not fail, but I did not promote. If they're not there, you can place them. And even by placing them, yes, there's going to be behind and they're always going to struggle. But there are other concerns. Usually those students are the ones who have some kind of something blocking them from being success. I don't want to say it's a behavior or they're bad or that they're delayed or anything, but there is something in their lives that is stopping them from doing that. At some point, they get to where that is not as key of a component and they're able to work around or catch up. For instance, I had a student who started a year with me who was working at, a few years ago, working at a grade 1 level. But by the time the end of the year caught up, they had been promoted and placed in place into the previous grades. By the time they left me, with the work I did, with the work of the support staff I had at the school, with the work and support of the parents, we were able to get that student to be meeting grade level standards.
So speaking about parents, what has been the biggest challenge with parents? Are parents usually pretty cooperative? Because I know when I was going into school, if there was a call from the principal that I had done something wrong, it wouldn't have been my parents going towards the teacher saying you screwed up. it would have been me getting in trouble. But now it seems that it's flipped.
There, I can honestly say in my 20 years of teaching, I have maybe had a handful, like counting on one hand, the number of serious issues I've had dealing with parents. I can say, yes, the parents are fierce and they want to support and defend their child with everything they have. But they realize when they discuss the situation with the teacher, they will also realize that the teacher is just as much in the side and in the corner, of that student. They want, as a teacher, you want to see all your students succeed. You push them, you work with them. The ones that I've had issues with typically are the ones, my experience, I'm not saying this is for everyone, my experience are the ones who struggled in school themselves. And they come into school with their students having a negative attitude already. So I like to work with the parents as much as I work with the students to give support to them and help them see the success of their students and feel that the school system isn't failing their kids.
So what would be one of the things that you think that we need to do to change in the school system to give teachers more support?
Biggest one that I can think of is class size. It is challenging to teach a concept in a classroom when there is 30 plus kids and be able to keep their focus on everything. A smaller class size would ensure that the students are all getting the time that they deserve. Having a large class size, you give the students as much time as you can, and you make sure that that is equitable between all your students. But having that smaller class, you feel like you are reaching them better. I have had situations where I've had the large classes where I feel I struggle and it's a difficult challenge to meet all those needs. I do it. It's my job. But then there's times where I have the smaller class and I feel, that success of like, okay, I can really do it. What I have started doing myself is I have changed the way I teach over the years, where I am able to still maintain my class structure, my classroom management, but I'm also able to have that sense of that smaller group, smaller class when I work with a student, so they feel they're getting that one-on-one experience with me, even though there's 20 other kids sitting around them.
So if we take a look and we now flip it to the kids side, how can we create an education system that works better for the kids? Would it be would still be the class size, or is there something else is it content?
I think the process the education system is going through currently with the development of new curriculum, the new standards-based way that a teacher is grading, all the way we're doing inclusion in the classroom, the things that will help the students see success, I already see being put into play in our classrooms.
So are you seeing chances of bullying going down or being less prevalent because there is that inclusion? So I know that, in the past, if those classes were separated and there was kids that are different, they would stand out more.
This year, I don't have special needs to say. I have some developmental, but even in the past where I have had handy-capable students or special needs students, my class, and not just my class, my school, does not treat those kids any different. They are huge supporters. They are their cheerleaders. When they see success, they power them on. They give them the props. They help them feel that sense of community, that sense of belonging. And it doesn't matter what type of disability you're talking about. students are understanding of this because it's part of our culture, it's part of our lives, that we recognize nobody's the same. And so in regards to bullying, I think that's always going to depend on the classroom dynamic or the school dynamic or the family dynamic.
Let's say there is a bullying incident. How does a school typically handle that now as opposed to how they used to, which was ignore it?
There is different steps. Like there's pyramids of intervention. It starts with trying to guide the students to say, okay, you take your first step. You say, and I used to call it the 5 finger. Like every finger represents a different thing. You say this person's name. I don't like it when. Please stop. You let the students take that first step. If it continues, then it becomes something that a teacher or an aide will talk to the student about. And then it's usually a contact with a parent. If it continues, then it becomes an administration thing, and then it continues up the pyramid. But it is definitely not, as is my opinion and my what I've observed over 20 years. It's not ignored as much as it was when we were kids.
How important has fitness now been in the curriculum? From my understanding, they've kind of toned back on fitness and physical education classes. What are they currently doing?
Well, it is standard for elementary to have, again, it depends on your district, provincial, province, whatever. We have mandatory 30 minutes minimum a day of daily physical activity, whether that is direct in the gym playing organized games, or outside playing in organized games, or even just taking a movement break in the classroom to stretch your brain, to reset your brain. It is like we used to go outside and stand against the wall and have somebody throw a big hard rubber ball at us called murder ball. Those games don't exist in the schools very much anymore. It's the physical activity is it's very prevalent, and I have taught as a teacher from kindergarten all the way up to junior high phys ed when I was substitute teaching. And it's go, go, go. Those junior high kids that I observed a couple of weeks ago, they were just ringing and dripping with sweat afterwards. Running the beep tests, doing physical activity, playing games. It's go, go, go.
That's great to hear. Now, do you teach any of the subjects like health and wellness as well?
I teach, the only subject that I do not teach this year actually is phys ed. I have a phys ed specialist in our school who does that, but I do teach like the classroom wellness, classroom health program, which I follow, the Alberta curriculum. I follow that program, and, you you adapt it as you need for your group or for your age level. But I am responsible for teaching that.
So what kind of information are elementary kids receiving? Is it, when I was in elementary, we didn't learn a lot about nutrition. We didn't learn a lot about exercising, the benefits. That came more like high school. So what kind of stuff are they learning in their health and wellness classes right now?
Well, I can't speak for the other ones because I'm not overly sure of other curriculums because I focus on mine. I have some experience with the grade 4 curriculum as well because I taught that. I know some of the grade 6. For health and wellness, for nutrition wise, I do a study of the Canada Food Guide. We look at what is appropriate for students of their age or gender or weight to consume, to have, what is the foods that they should avoid, And then I actually end that up by having the students sit with the food guide and do a meal plan for a day, doing a breakfast, dinner, supper, and a snack.
Let's switch our focus back to teachers for a minute. In your opinion, are teachers getting paid what they deserve? I know there is a pay structure in there, and the longer you've been teaching, you can hit the top of the pay structure. No bonuses.
No, there's no bonus. There's no overtime. There's nothing like that for teachers.
When you were taking your education degree, did they make you aware of the pay structure, the monetary compensation that you do get at these different levels for teaching?
Definitely. Your wage is based on the number of years of education you have, the number of years of experience you have. If you go into education with no experience and 4 years of education, then you can look. It's available online through I'm not 100% sure, through the ATA or through each individual school district. You can see what you're going to get, and then you can balance it out. So if you go in with 2 degrees and 6 years of experience, you're going to start at a higher wage. And then every year until you reach that 10-year mark, you have your yearly cost of living increase. But after you reach the top, then you are dependent on contract negotiations or central bargaining to figure if you're going to get an increase or not. So being at the top of my scale, without having any of our contracts redone in the financial area, I have not seen an increase in 5-6 years.
And that's got to be tough, especially since cost of living is always going up. And especially in Grand Prairie, when there's an oil boom or bust, I mean, prices fluctuate quite a bit, especially with gas.
Yeah. But when I started teaching, I was on my own, and I was quite comfortable continuing on and on. Now I've got a family with 3 boys, and it can get a little tight.
What would you say would be the most stressful thing about teaching?
Report card season. No.
Well, that's got to be part of it, because I know that's huge. And along with the report card season comes Meet the Teacher, right?
Oh, well, I will be honest. Meet the Teacher night is a really enjoyable evening, getting to come in and have the kids introduce their parents to their teacher. I think that's a blast. Parent-teacher interviews, that can be a little overwhelming sometimes. I have just finished my 40th round of parent-teacher interviews this year.
Ouch.
And I know, yeah. To me, it's never been a huge stress. I make sure that I talk to parents beforehand. If I know there's going to be a area of concern, I will phone them or email them, letting them know that here's the heads up. We can talk about it more at interviews. Writing report cards, the paperwork, programming plans, that's a lot. Personally, don't feel a lot of stress from those components. I've been doing it long enough that I can feel I do a good job of writing those, and it doesn't keep me up at nights. What keeps me up at night sometimes is worrying about some of those students that I have in my class that I see during the day and don't come to school with breakfast and don't come with lunch. And we have a great program at our school where kids, they can get granola bars or snacks or fruit or lunches throughout the day if they're hungry. Those are the ones that you worry about. You worry about those students who are where school is their safe place and home is not. To me, that's the biggest stress that I deal with.
So what do you do in a case like that, especially if, it's obvious that something's wrong with a child, whether it be at home or outside of the home? How can you intervene?
It's a touchy situation. In the past, I have had to reach out to child protective services because of situations I've been made aware of. But you don't do that lightly. Like, you need to know your facts. You need to know what's going on. And sometimes a kid can say, hey, I'm upset. My mom hurt me this morning. And then you don't want to jump to conclusions. You want to figure out what's going on, because the mom may have been zipping up the jacket and got a little high and nicked their chin. Right? So you have to be very, very cautious and very careful and make sure you have your facts before you make that step and contact your admin or CPS or whomever it is.
What advice would you have to somebody that's thinking about going into teaching?
Make sure that you have a passion for working with students, that you're not going into this job you're not going into this job thinking, oh, I get 2 months off in the summer, I get 2 weeks off at Christmas, I get a week off at Easter. The reality is during that time, yeah, you have it off and you're not in the building, but you're still planning, you're still prepping, you're still getting ready for that new group of kids you're going to see in September. You are going to be inundated with stories and germs and laughter and goofiness. And if you do not have the patience for the kids' lives, it's going to be hard. It's not just about going into that school and teaching 1 + 1 is 2 and A, B, C, D. You are, for 190 days of that year, you are one of the most important people in their world. Their classmates are their second family, and you need to be ready for that.
Knowing what you know right now, would you do it all over again?
In a heartbeat.
And how come?
I love my job. I love making a difference in these students' lives. I said earlier, having these graduates come back and see me, who they haven't had as a teacher in 8 years, to tell me the impact I've made on their lives, that gives me that fuel, that fire to keep doing this. I honestly couldn't tell you, if I wasn't a teacher, I don't know what I'd be doing. I really don't. I love this job so much, even with the stresses, the headaches, the whatever you call it. I go every day for those kids to give them 100% of what I have. And nothing would change that.
Now, I know you've been on a bit of a fitness journey yourself.
Yep.
Do you want to run us through that a little bit? Like, what made you change? And
what made me change?
Where did you start?
Okay. Well, I was noticing teaching phys ed that year, that playing the games with the kids, I was getting a little winded. My knees were getting sore. I suffer from gout, and I was realizing my gout attacks were becoming more and more frequent. And I just okay, wonder what's going on here. And then my niece was born. And I thought, I want to be able to sit and play with this little girl. And I went upstairs to my house and I stepped on my scale and I saw that scale spin around to a number that I'd never seen before. And in that second, I decided I needed to make a change. I went online, I bought a treadmill, I changed all my eating habits, and I decided I have to look after me because there's people who depend on me. And that was the start. And it took a lot of work and a lot of dedication, because I've heard you say this before, no matter what, I'm still a fat kid on the inside. I love my chocolate chip cookies. I love my bottles of root beer.
I love Pringles.
You
stick a can of Pringles in front of me, I'm going to be hard pressed not to eat the entire can.
Well,
that fat kid wants to escape, Being that I was 275 at one point and now I'm 75 pounds lighter than that.
Yeah.
That kid still wants to get out there.
Yeah. When I stepped on my scale and I saw that number, it was, it's hard for me to say it, but I was 330 pounds.
Wow.
And yeah. And as of this morning when I stepped on my scale, it's that time of year where I'm wrapping up. So granted, my weight's a little up, but I stepped on that scale and I was 248.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So that made the difference. And I feel now like I have naturally bad ankles anyway, but I don't have as frequent of gout attacks. I don't have pain in my back as much. I feel I move around better when I'm playing with the kids, my boys, or the kids at school, or my nieces. I don't feel like I'm as exhausted or worn out as much. And it's just really changed my whole outlook.
Now, as we wrap up, is there anything you want to tell us about the school system that we might not have already gone through?
The teachers that spend their days in these classrooms working with everybody's kids, they're there not because they have to be, they're there because they want to be. Teachers give 100% of themselves to these students. You'd never want to see a student fail. You want to see them see success and praise that success. I praise my students for every little victory that they have. Whether it is they finished their math work on time, or they went up in their reading levels, they went up 5 or 6 levels. I praise them, I celebrate them, and I make their parents aware. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. It's not always appreciated work. But these professionals give everything they have for kids that are not theirs. But we view those kids as ours.
You walk out your front door, you find a lottery ticket, and you win $10 million. What are you doing tomorrow?
Going to work.
You wouldn't change anything?
The only thing I would change is, as you know, I am a diehard lifelong comic book geek. I would try and find that holy grail of comic books that has been eluding my collection for 40 years.
Is it Action Comics?
Action Comics #1 would be a miracle to find and own. That would be great. No, for me, it's Amazing Spider-Man #50. First appearance of the Kingpin, classic bright red cover, with Spider-Man looking over his shoulder as Peter Parker walks away from him. Spider-Man No More written on the cover. I have a copy, but I would like that mint copy.
All right. I'd like to thank Chris Ruhl, a veteran teacher, for joining us once again here on Performance Theory. Chris, where can people reach out to you on social media?
Actually, I have a very limited social media presence right now. Part of the thing about being a teacher is I don't put myself out there as much as I would like.
All right. Not a problem. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank everybody listening out there right now. And make sure you support those teachers, whether you have kids in school or not. And as always, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me at Mike Clark Life. That's my social media handle for pretty much everything. And I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a review on iTunes or just pass the show along to somebody that you know.